This time on Geni's Way, Kristian Livolsi joins us to share his tremendous experience as a business advisor and entrepreneur. He'll tell us which personal qualities and mindset are necessary for entrepreneurial success. This is going to be one banger after another, so get your comfy chair and snacks ready. Now, let's get to it. Hi, I want to welcome Kristian Livolsi. What a pleasure to have you on Geni's Way. I can't wait for our conversation. It will be amazing. I know that. Kristian is an international entrepreneur and been involved in 80 ventures. Can you believe 80? Or maybe 100. I don't know. Kristian can tell you all about it. And he advised thousands of business owners across 19 countries. What an amazing experience. Can't wait for our conversation.
Yeah, no, it's going to be great.
Kristian, from your years and years of experience, would you highlight 3 to 5 maybe top quality for entrepreneurs that you've seen succeeded and you help them to succeed and you know what quality is necessary nowadays?
Yeah, look, Geni, firstly, thank you for having me on your podcast and on your show. I really appreciate it. And certainly the very professional outfit that you guys have been behind the scenes. But thank you for that. Look, entrepreneurs, there are many qualities of a great entrepreneur. And I want to make the distinction between good and great. Lots of people can be average. Some people can be good. Very few can be great. And I think what makes an entrepreneur stand out, and by the way, caveat, great doesn't mean successful in terms of money. It means successful in terms of being able to achieve what you set out to achieve, what you're fulfilling your purpose, right? So I think the first thing is entrepreneurs are purpose driven. I think an entrepreneur without a purpose is not really an entrepreneur. They're just trying to be a business person. The other great qualities that you need to have is you need to be incredibly adaptable. It's not just about the pivots; it's about the moment. Sometimes you've got to you've got to be so flexible in order to achieve what it is that you want to achieve. You've got to be prepared to do what no one else is willing to do, and I think that then the other quality is courage. A lot of entrepreneurs, play the big game alone for so long, and that's why some don't survive. But you need the courage to continue, and that leads me to perseverance. It's great to have courage, but if you don't persevere, and I'm not saying persevere blindly, Geni. I think the key here is perseverance in terms of knowing what your goals are, being able to follow your strategy, and when everyone is telling you that what you're doing is impossible, to just remember that the word impossible actually means possible. And I think Audrey Hepburn says that quite famously. And I think the last thing, and probably one of the most important, is tenacity. That resilience. And, I see so many people who give up just when they're at the finish line. And, that it breaks my heart, so I think that's something that's really important. So to me, I think that's 5. I think that's 5 things that I would absolutely classify as important qualities of an entrepreneur. They sound easy. They're not. It's really easy to say I'm courageous, but in the moment, are you? And I see that a lot. I see people say to me, "Oh, I can do this," and then you watch them, and they've got no perseverance. They've got no persistence. And then their resilience lapses, and all of a sudden it's like, well, it's all too hard. And I have a great saying. It's not the circumstances that we find ourselves in that dictate our outcome. It's the decisions we make. And a lot of people make bad decisions, good decisions, and a lot of people don't make any decisions. And so that's really, how I live my life is by being decisive. And I think, it's why people come to me for me to write their strategies all around the world, because we map them out, we build them, and then we execute with them.
Wow, every single one of them, you and I can spend at least 30 minutes discussing. But
Absolutely.
I feel like the one that I really want to focus on is that courage and determination. How do you continue to develop that? How do you not giving up? How do you persevere? And another thing that I've noticed, and I jot some notes, and it's like strategy was purpose.
There is nothing without purpose. And I think people, I'm very blessed. My strat line is live with purpose, and everyone that works with me, particularly behind the scenes, I'm a very interesting character, Geni.
Really? No way.
I
would never ever guess that.
Yeah, no. I have a couple of personas. There's the bravado at the front, and then there is the person that genuinely loves and cares for everyone behind the scenes. And once people make it into my inner circle, it's up to you to get out of it. In the context that if you break any of our rules or trust, then you're gone. Like I also believe that you can't function without trust. And trust is built on those qualities that we talked about earlier. You earn trust, and you earn it by, in my opinion, the actions that you take. But I think, look, strategy. Anyone can write a strategy. Okay, if you understand strategic thinking, game plan theory, or any of the conceptual concepts, whether you want to use McKinsey's 7 models, whether you want to use Vern Harnish's stuff or Gino Wickman's philosophies, like there's tons of stuff out there, right? And anyone can write it if you actually know the framework. But very few people can write strategies that actually have purpose and meaning behind them. And the reason for that is that most people don't bother to understand the purpose of the company or the purpose of the people within that company. Whereas, one of the things that I do that differentiates our market dominating competitor crushing strategies that we write for clients is that I get into that business and, we roadmap it first, understand the people, understand their values, their culture. And, a lot of companies have poor culture, and then they wonder why they have, very little retention. I'm a big believer that if you want to have a successful business, you need to be a for-purpose business that can retain its people. And retain its people is not just your customers, it's your employees, your talent.
That's
right?
a huge
Because without
asset.
that talent,
your talent is your asset.
Without that talent, you don't have a business. I'm very blessed, Geni. I advise, a lot of companies, and I've got long-term relationships. Some of my clients bless me with, their friendship after, 3-4 years. Like, I never thought as an entrepreneur that I could have clients for 6-7 years in my advisory firm, because I'm the type of guy that loves a new challenge and a new opportunity. I'm a solution seeker, and so I'm constantly looking to create and establish solutions. Firstly, for myself, that is why I've had 80 ventures, and I failed. I failed significantly in those ventures. I think for clarity purposes, let me explain what I define as a venture. Anything that I've had to put at least $30,000 invested into it is a venture, right? So it's not just I started something and it was a 2-bit company with 2 cents in it. No, it has to be an investment of at least $30,000. That's real money. Not to mention that any company that you're planning to open and operate, it takes a lot of time. So there's a lot of investment of time. So we never put the value of time in that equation. So it's really a money thing, and that has to be incorporated, right? So to think of the amount of money that I've poured into corporations, it sometimes makes me quite upset. But you live and learn, and out of the first 80 companies, and there is actually 80 of them. Out of the 80, someone asked me the other day the stats. And I actually went and got my EA to go and have a look. 26 of those companies failed dismally, like as in failed. So not only did they cost me 30 odd thousand US dollars to commence, but then even when they operated and they lost money, they lost. I lost 30 odd million, a $30 million company, when I was 32 years old, and I'd been incredibly successful up until that point. But what I wasn't paying attention.
5 years ago or something?
No, it wasn't 5 years ago. It was a while ago now. It was about 15 years ago now. And I went from being, a pin-up boy of the media, very high profile. I owned lots of restaurants and bars, and, owning a restaurant and a bar and a hotel it's like you're a rock star, right? Like that's kind of the same thing. And you get caught up in this. And I had, technology companies, I had media companies, and I just got a bit full of it, and
Did your ego got in the way, you think?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%, But at the time, you don't realize it. You're young, you've been ambitious, you're driven, you're doing everything that you can, and your heart's in the right place, but you forget about your people. And I grew to, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was over 150, 160 employees at that time across the group. And, I had a really awesome team for the first 4 years because that's when I was at my peak. I was engaging with everyone. I knew everyone by name. And then as I continued to grow, I forgot about that. And it became a lot about me. And I think that's because you're trying to survive. You get to that size, you're very unsure. I went out and hired a whole bunch of people to help me and made the wrong hires because I didn't get the right advice. And, I made some really poor decisions. I started innovating instead of being an entrepreneur. I think that they're two very different things. That's why there are geniuses like Steve Jobs, and they're very, very rare in this world. I don't really care what people think about Zuckerberg, but, he's a genius. What he thought about, what he wanted to do when he created Facebook, and what it's led to is two different things. But it's the visionaries, right? These, and I think I wanted to go down the path of being a visionary, and it could have worked out for me if it wasn't for what we call the global financial crisis in Australia, and venture capital money falling out of the sky during that period because of the mortgage meltdown that was affected around the world, but predominantly in the US. That then had a rebound effect in us in Australia, especially when a lot of the VC companies back in the 2000s were American, not like now that we have Australian VC companies and private equity firms. So, but again, there's circumstances, right? And remember what I said earlier, it's the decisions you make. And I made some poor decisions, had I understood, or if I'd factored in that my team they were a transit, employment market, people in hospitality, they study law or they study medicine or they study arts or they study whatever, right? And eventually they're going to go and take on their careers. So I never factored in that I could create this incredible A team, and this A team would be with me forever. That was the biggest mistake I made. And eventually, even though through their loyalty, they're like, "Hey, Kristian, I've been doing a medical degree. I'm now a doctor. I'd love to keep working for you, but I just can't," And so there was the constraints of an industry plagued by poor wages and poor circumstances and all of these things that I just never factored into. So going back to strategy, when I write strategies for people, one of the biggest things that we put on our strategic roadmaps are the trends affecting that industry and any global trends that might affect. And that's because it affected me. And so I've been able to take all of those failures and all of those successes, and I've been able to put them into a framework for people so they don't make the same mistakes I made, right? We're still going to make mistakes. If you breathe, right, you are at risk of making a mistake.
Are there mistakes, or are there just a stepping stone to perhaps to that next level?
Oh, look, they're both, right? People say to me all the time, like, I don't believe failure exists. And I'm like, well, I have studied failure at an academic level. and I can tell you it exists. I have also, studied failure at a practical level. I know what it feels like to being really wealthy and then being sleeping on someone else's couch, living, from house to house, not being able to afford to even, put petrol in the only asset that you've got left, which was a car to get you from A to B. And I knew that I had to somehow keep my car so that I could
How did
continue
you
working.
overcome it? And what did you learn from all of that?
Well, I overcome it by being persistent, by having courage, by not giving up. I suffered acute depression when I became homeless and I was broke. I felt like, the whole world was against me. All the emotions that normal people feel. But at that moment, I also realized I wasn't normal. I've never been normal. Even my doctors say, you're not normal. You're a freak. And I'm like, yep, we know that, right? And so I've just become used to just being me. And I think that I was very lucky, Jenny. As I said, there's two sides to me. There's the side that people see publicly, the people that don't know me, and then there's the side that the people that know me see. And I was really, really lucky. I was supported immensely. When I had the shame of not wanting to go back to my mother's house, and so I couch surfed from person to person that I knew, and some of my friends were quite wealthy, and they're like, Kristian, don't worry about it. Like, you're going to bounce back. You'll start again. You'll do something. So the support network that I had around me was phenomenal. And then I did. I made the decision. I said, I need to go back, and I rang mum and I said, listen, I need to come back home. I can't do this. And I went and saw the doctors. I went and saw a psychiatrist. I went and saw a psychologist. I went and saw, a hypnotherapist. I went everywhere, right? I went back to church, and I reconnected in my spiritual side, and and I'd only had a gap for a year or so in there where I was just questioning myself, right? Like, everyone does it. You start to question, why am I here? What am I doing? And it was the circumstances I was facing were really difficult, but I went and sought the help. And this is where I really understood asking for the right help from the right people is really important. And off air, we're talking about all the noise that's in the market. I'm on a mission, right? To make sure that lots of people are not getting poor advice from the fakes that are out there.
I was going to say, how do you know who's the right person? And you're already answering that question.
Yeah, this is how you know you're the right person. You got to talk to someone that's talking about things I'm talking about, and they're not scripting it from Chat GPT. This is the next big problem that we now face. AI and the ability to just get an AI to write you content is creating even more fake experts out there. But and so I say to people, be very careful by all the glitz and glamour. I'm the guy that walks around in a t-shirt 24 hours a day. I'm a chairman of companies, and I don't put on a shirt or a suit or a tie, even when I'm, chairing a $30-40 million business. Sometimes I probably let myself down. I should do my hair, and I should probably put a bit of color into my graying salt and pepper beard. But the reality of it is, what you see is what you get. And my expertise is in here, right? It's in my brain. It's on paper. We've built systems. We've built processes. But also what I think people need to do is don't believe the shit you read, right? Ask to speak, especially when you're spending big money on advice. Ask to speak to references. A great advisor and a great consultant, forget coaches, a great consultant and a great advisor will have the ability to have references, right? I mean, when I have people ask me all the time, companies that come to me and they say, well, we've seen some of your work. It's pretty amazing. You've been referred. Can we get some referrals, some references? Absolutely. Who do you want to talk to? What do you want to talk to? Someone who is a mum and dad business that, I changed their life because they put in the work, because that's what it is. I'm not a genius, right? I have just, no, not at all. I don't believe in that. I've just done the work, right? Like, I've put in the hard work, and that's what I teach my children.
So
I don't care what grades
are you saying anybody could be a genius if they put in the work?
Look, I have a growth mindset and I have a fixed mindset, but I spend a lot of time in a growth mindset. And I actually believe that everyone can be anything they want to be as long as they put in the work. Now, obviously, the caveat is that if you have a genuine disability, right? Let's say you have dementia. Well, clearly you're not going to be able to think, right? And we don't know enough about that condition to know what's going on in someone's mind. But what I'm trying to say is, if you are a reasonably healthy, functional child, adult, you have the ability to do and be and have anything you want, but you've got to prepare to make sacrifices. You've got to be prepared. I was listening to one of the Matildas. So the Matildas is the Australian female football team, and it was I think Caitlin Ford. I love female sports, right? Like, I'm so pro women. My mum was a single mum, so all of those things, right? And my mother-in-law was a single mum from birth. So I have a lot of respect for women who carry the mental load and whatnot. So I follow a lot of female sports. I have a daughter, so my little baby, she's 6 years old. She's not small. She's she's already taller than her brother, who's 9. But look, the reality of it is, I was listening to Caitlin Ford, and she just said, a young girl asked her, "How do you become a Matilda?" And I think that's such a powerful question for an athlete to have to answer, because they're about to inspire, and she inspired a generation, in my opinion. She just said, "Look, it's hard work, right? Like, you don't know you're going to play for the Matildas, but you aspire. Your purpose is, I want to play for the national team, and and the sacrifices you have to make." And she really articulated it well. She said, when your friends are going to birthday parties, right, you have to stay home knowing you've got to train the next day, and that it's a commitment. She really made it clear, and it's about the hard work. And it's the same philosophy that I have with my clients, the same philosophy I have with my children. I don't care if my children get D's, but if they're putting in the effort and they are demonstrating application and they are learning, no shit, sometimes things are going to be hard.
Yes.
Jenny, sometimes things are going to be really hard, and sometimes you're not going to understand it. I've got dyslexia and I've got ADHD. I've beaten both of those, right? But if I go, like this week, I've been working really, really, how can I explain? I built the business everybody wants, right? It's all about freedom. I get to choose whether I want to be on this podcast at 5:30 in the morning on a Saturday, right? I choose whether I want to work a Saturday. Like today, I'm working with the day hospital that I'm chairman of. It's the only day we can bring the whole leadership team together, because during the week it's really busy. And so we work on a Saturday to bring the leadership together every quarter, so that we can functionally reposition their 90-day priorities and create order and strategy for those days. But that's my choice.
Yeah, because
right?
you love it. You have a purpose behind what you do. You love what you do.
Absolutely. But I'm devastated at the same time, because I have a rule that I don't miss my children's recreational activities. So I'm missing Leonardo's football game. He's playing at 8:15. And I'm totally subconscious about it, right? And and then I'm missing Lavender's ballet and tap sessions, because that's my time with my children. But they understand the sacrifice that I have to make and they have to make in order to have the things that they have. And that's the things that I want to teach. And I teach business owners the same thing. People are like, "Oh, I want to go to work for 40 hours. You just started your business. You do not have the luxury of 40 hours. You have to work 60, 70, 80, 100 if that's what it takes. But there's no point in doing it blindly. You actually have to do it with a strategy, with a plan in mind. Now, a lot of people can't afford strategy and plans when they start their business, right? Don't bother building a business plan that no one's going to read, that's 20 pages long. Write a plan on a piece of paper. It's that simple. Get a piece of paper and go, "These are my goals. These are my values. This is the reason why I'm doing it." And that's enough of a plan, right? Your goals will guide you in the direction. And then you set yourself goals. Okay, I'm going to make X, Y, Z so I can actually get that level of advice. And, I don't underestimate the value of good advice. Also, don't underestimate the value of poor advice, right? It can destroy you, right? And so this brings me back to the point. How do you distinguish who's good and who's not out in the market? It's hard, because there's a lot of people out there that are so much better at video content than me. There are so much people that are better at me and making their whole life look amazing. I just don't care. And that because I don't care is my issue, right? So, and my team say to me, but Kristian, if you cared just a little bit more, right? I said, what, you want me to take videos of me getting out of my cars, getting out of a helicopter that I've taken to get from A to B, right? Getting into a private jet. Like I just don't give a shit, right? Like I don't have a private jet, right? And I don't get into a private jet. I fly business class on an airline. Why? It's faster for me. It's more convenient. I don't have to worry about it. I get, 1A and I'm in and out of the plane and I walk off and I do what I have to do. People don't realize the sacrifice that even you make when you're traveling. They look at it and they go, oh, look at you. You're flying business class, or you are, first class, or whatever it might be, right? Where, depending on which part of the world you are, you're privileged. No, I'm not fucking privileged. I've worked for it.
You work for
right?
it.
Sorry, I just swore. But I'm it's not a privilege. It's something I've earned, but I don't take it for granted, right? Never once do I take what I have for granted. Like even before we got on this call, I meditate every single day, and I always look for the things that I'm grateful for. I'm a very blessed man. I have the most amazing wife in the world that allows me to be the person that I am every single day. She's helping us raise two really beautiful children who have, just the most incredible heart, right? And then she convinced me to get a French bulldog who's become my best friend. I'm not an animal person, right? And never was. And now he just doesn't leave me alone. And even when I'm like, Louis, leave me alone, he just looks at you and you're just like, it's pure love. And I think there's no replacement for love in this world. I think if there was something that you couldn't live without, like some people say, I can live without someone loving me. Bullshit, right? Because that's because you've never really experienced true love. When I look at my children's eyes and my son will get in the car and say, Pa, I love you. I just look at him, I'm like, what do you need? And he's like, no. And I really, really love you. I want to say thank you for giving me the chance to do the things that I do. And that means that I know that we're instilling good values into him. Don't get me wrong. He's a smart ass, right? And he's got plenty of attitude.
He learns from the best.
I don't know. Geni, we've had to build his confidence a lot. Leonardo really struggled with confidence. He's little in terms of his size at school, and it's hard to believe because I'm 6'4", or 6'3", 6'4". My wife is 6 foot tall, so it's like, how did he? And he'll shoot up at some point. But his confidence. He's academically, he's not bright. Only because of application. This year he's beginning to apply himself. His grades are going up, but it's been 3 years of hard work, right? And that's what all we want to teach him. He's played instruments and never really applied himself. Now he's learning the saxophone and he loves it. And so his grade in that area has skyrocketed. And so this is what I mean by having purpose. You got to have, and I think Tony Robbins talks a lot about passion. And I believe if you have passion and then you have purpose, you'll skyrocket.
And then
because
you know
the reason why. Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I've loved about Tony over the years of watching that man build. Doesn't he look so much better today than he did 30 years ago? But I don't know if there's been some nips and tucks. I have no idea. But what he gets to influence so many people on such a level, and he does not take that for granted. Like, you think he could be a rock star and not put in the work and get out on stage. Instead, his commitment to his people is so big, right? Like, it's quite amazing to watch. And, and I've only ever been to one of his events in my entire life, and two maybe one 20 years ago, and maybe one of the online virtuals just to see what has changed. And what blows me away? Nothing has changed. Right? It's a formula and he plays to it, but he plays full out. He's got so much passion and purpose when he's on stage. And that's the example I want to use. And he, don't underestimate, he's lost a lot of money too. He had partners rip him off. He had a whole bunch of other things, but he keeps bouncing back because he's built the tenacity, the perseverance, the adaptability, the courage. But the big thing is he's got purpose and passion, right? And I think that that's really important. And I think when you have passion is when you actually genuinely care about people. Like my team say to me, Kristian, your biggest core competence is how much you care for people. And when they first said that to me, I was like, what are you talking about? care is not a competence. A competence is something that someone else doesn't necessarily have. What's your core competence? It's something that distinguishes you. But when I actually then interviewed a lot of our clients over those years, they're like, Kristian, you care. Like, you totally care so much. You care more about my business than I do. And I'm like, do I? Is it that obvious? But I love business, right? Like, I actually, as I said earlier, I love creating opportunities. Yeah, every challenge has an opportunity, Geni, and I think this is the key. I don't go out looking for problems. There's very different things. I'm not a problem solver. People always say to me, but you're always solving problems. I mean, not by choice, right? Like, I'm a solution seeker. I go out looking for opportunities, right? And normally an opportunity lies behind a challenge. Okay?
Every problem have a solution.
Yep, and every challenge has an opportunity, right? So that's, and I think people forget that. But again, it's having the right mindset. You've got to have the right mindset. If you go into every single day, like, I wake up in the morning and I don't need an alarm clock to wake up. It doesn't matter what time I go to bed at night, but I'm inspired to get up because I know I'm going to make a difference today. And people say, but that's great. That's fine. So the last 2 years, my team said to me, Kristian, why don't you build a program, right, that teaches people how to find their purpose? And I'm like, wow, it took me 10 years. And I did. I wrote, over the course of 2 years, I wrote a full-day program that is the building block of finding purpose. And we rolled it out in December last year because my team made me. And it's a folder this big, and it's a workshop that I run. No one else can run it at the moment because I want to put everything I've got in it. And we did it to a room of about 35 of our big one-on-one clients. And it was phenomenal. The vulnerability in the room, what people learned about themselves. And what we learned is that we need to have a follow-up program to that. And so, that's been on the pipeline to launch this year. But, it's just, there's so many other things going on. And as an entrepreneur, I'm trying not to do the mistakes that I did in the past. And one of those is not to try and juggle too many plates at the same time. I only have five companies.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. That a lot of people do that. And then you end up not winning anything because you're chasing too many things at once.
Look, that was focus, right? That was my biggest issue when I was growing profusely. And I almost made that same mistake when I became Kristian 2.0. From 2010 to 2015, 16, I amassed 15, 16 companies that I was trying to run simultaneously. And then I became an adjunct professor at a Sandstone University in Australia. I was then appointed the entrepreneur in resident of the same university. All of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, I can do way more and I can keep doing more. And I'm like, whoa, what am I doing? I'm back to this point again. I'm manic, right? Like I'm manic, and all of a sudden I can't even remember people's names because I'm meeting so many people every single day. And it's about knowing how to regulate yourself and knowing when. And so I do a lot of self-reflection. I journal every single day at the end of a day.
Focus and balance. Yeah. You need to have focus, and you have to have balance between all of that. And one of the other things that Tony was talking about when the COVID started, the power of pivot. That's so important. When COVID hit and everybody was freaking out, he had to pivot and build the studio because all of his light events shut down. I've heard that story. That was quite powerful, the way he talked about the power of pivot, determination. He said, I'm going to get it done. I'm going to do it bigger than anyone in the world. And he had contacted the Zoom people, and they increased the size of the room. Yeah.
I mean, that's actually, so that goes to the point of adaptability, right? Mm-hmm. So Tony went, and Tony would have been, him and Dean and all those guys would have been on the cusp of going broke because their business models were events.
Live events, yes.
So, they were live events. And Tony was always of the belief that you could only bring that much energy and vitality and power to in a live event. He never thought that you could do it because it was about him bringing his energy, his emotion to the table. And when they came up with that 360-degree studio, and I mean, I don't know who came up with the idea. It's genius because it's revolutionizing everything even today. Mm-hmm. Tony and his mates have made more money by being able to influence more people than ever before, because instead of now filling a stadium with 10,000 seats, he can now fill a Zoom with 150,000 people from all around the world. And people go, oh, look at that, he's making heaps of money. The reason he's making the money is because he cares so much about people. His entire being, that passion, that purpose, is to affect the lives of more people. And what I think is really clever about what Tony did is, instead of hating the haters, I think he went and did a study with Stanford, a research study, to prove and validate that people who attend UPW, I don't quote me on this, I know it's somewhere, and I've been trying to, a while ago I was trying to find it to sort of use it as a lever for the new program that I'm building, or that I built at the time. But he basically, they got a Harvard study that validates and proves that if you attend a UPW, you're more likely to succeed in life than someone who doesn't. Now, that's enough validation to make Tony Robbins a proper thing, because for years he was the guy on late night television. You think of the adversity he faced. He's a gigantic man with gigantic hands and a gigantic head, and everyone wanted to just criticize him and it wasn't. But first time I came into contact with Tony Robbins was when I was a porter and concierge at a very luxury hotel when I was 18 years old, 19, and I was driving the valet. And every time I'd get into these luxury cars, there'd be Tony Robbins' voice playing. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, this is the late night television guy. This bloke's driving a Ferrari or a Porsche, right? Or a Mercedes or a BMW, and they're listening. And this is the days of cassettes. Now I'm showing my age, right? So the tape. And I'm just like, who is this man? And do you know the biggest mistake I made? I never went out and bought his stuff, right? Until maybe I was 30, after I failed, is when I went and actually got some of his stuff, because I used some of the audio stuff, Personal Power, whatever it was, Personal Power 1, 2, just to try and, I was going after those solutions, right? Like, where can I go and get some, and some of it helped, some of it didn't. But the reality of it is, the point I'm making is, people out there will judge people. And yet he was able to overcome all of those things. And I know this sounds like I'm promoting Tony. I have no affiliation with Tony Robbins in any way, shape, or form. But
I think you're illustrating the power of the mindset.
Look, I really admire people who have succeeded, right? It's really interesting. I do a fair bit of podcasting now in the US, and a lot of people afterwards will message me and they're like, so when are you coming to the US? And I'm like, it's one of the only continents that I have not been in. I have clients there, but I've traveled the whole of Europe.
Kristian.
Yeah, it's on the cards for next year. And the reality of it is, a lot of people say to me, why aren't you not here? A lot of my friends now saying to me, why don't you just do a lot of work in the US? Like, a lot of people I know only have clients in the US and live in Australia. And I'm like, I've just always been territorial in Australia and Asia, and that's where I've done most of my work, and in Europe. But what it is that you guys in the US, you have less focus on failure and more focus on success. So people will happily fail and succeed, and it's seen as a badge of honor. Whereas in Australia, we have a thing called tall poppy syndrome, where as soon as you rise to the top, everyone wants to cut you off, right? And it's something that we need to change culturally, but it's very hard. And so when we talk about our successes, people think we're arrogant, right? Whereas it's a terrible trait, right? And this is why I have to I try and avoid talking about everything that I've done and everything that I do every day, because people go, oh, well, you're just being arrogant about it. It's like, well, I'm not. I'm trying to share with you the journey. And I didn't just get here today. I didn't wake up and go, oh, yeah, I have all this. I actually had to work really hard for it. Oh. No, but see, this is and so this is what I'm even finding, because you asked me earlier, are you constantly learning courage and adaptability? Always. You never stop learning, right? Like my biggest idol, and the person that I looked up to the most is my grandmother, right? She was an immigrant from Italy, came over in a boat with a 2-year-old child in 1952. My grandfather had already migrated over here. He was a prisoner of war in World War II. The story, as he always used to put it, I got myself arrested because I didn't want to fight for the Germans, and so I made sure that the English caught me. They put me into a camp, and I learned English. And he was very clever because he came to Australia and he spoke English as a migrant. But my grandfather and my grandmother were very beautiful people. They worked really hard. They built, catering businesses and supermarkets and delis to because they came to Australia. There wasn't any of those things they were used to eating, small goods, tomato sauce, like to make pasta and all of those things. And so they brought their culture, their heritage here. But my grandmother, my grandfather passed away when she was 58 and she was left widowed with a couple of bits and pieces and a business and a family to support. And she built an empire. One of the strongest women I've ever met in my life.
Wow.
And she inspired me, but she was forced to stop learning when she got dementia in her 90s. And I looked after her for that time, and she'd wake me up at 2 a.m. and say, "Let's play Brishkala." It's a card game, and I would wake up and I'd play with her and make her smile, and I'll get emotional, but I looked at how someone at that age could turn around everything and build a fortune. Like it was, and why? Because she worked hard, right? She worked hard. She put in the effort. But the byproduct of that, Geni, was that I got taught to work hard my whole life. My father was a hard worker
from young age. So am I. I always work hard.
There's only one problem with that. You don't have to work hard. You have to work smart too. And I have always been brought up to work hard, put in 16, 17 hours a day. Well, 10 years ago, I realized I can't live like this. That was the last part of the circle. And I said, I'm going to build a lifestyle business where I can choose to go to work whenever I want. Now, it took me 5 years. Sorry, it took me.
Well, require building a team that you can rely on.
That's right. But you got to start with yourself first. Right. So I started for 4 years. I had to change my own mindset around working less to make more. And then eventually over the last 6 years, I've been able to do it. And now, I've got a business that if I want to go to work for 10 hours a week, it just keeps pouring in cash through all the other revenues, without me having to work. And it's not just about businesses. It's about not trading your time for money. And so I'm always learning, because if you're always adapting, you're always pivoting, you're always trying to learn what you could do. I mean, you think about it. Technology has allowed the opportunity for you and I to be having this conversation. And what I hope is that there is one person out there that will listen to this and it will transform their lives. I'm not doing this because I want more exposure. I'm not doing this because I want more money. I'm doing it because I actually love to share what it is that I've been through and what people can do, give them really good, valuable tips and tricks so that they can start their journey. And that journey is going to be fraught with success and failure. Does not matter how you look at it, right? And it's okay to fail. I mean, I wrote a book called "It's Okay to Fail," and some people, when I give it away to people for their birthdays, right? And I always say to people,
"That's an awesome present. I love it."
Yeah, but you know how many people feel insulted, and they say to me, "Oh, what are you trying to say?" I'm like, "Read the fucking book." Read it. It's going to change your life. It's not very long. And it's going to influence your ability to make better decisions. And and this is the issue. Like, a lot of people don't feed their brain.
Yes.
An acquaintance of mine, someone that I have a lot of respect for. His name's Toby. You guys will probably know them as a company called Sweat. Him and Kayla, quite well known in the fitness industry. They're Adelaide people. And Toby, when I was having breakfast with him one morning, I said, "Toby, what's the key to your success?" He goes, "Man, I read." He's a prolific reader, and it made me realize that I wasn't reading. I'm a published author. I've got, academic stuff behind me. I've got practical, but I don't read. Everything I've learned was from application and that little bit of study that I did when I did my MBA back in 2018 when I wanted to connect all the practical with the theory and make sure that I wasn't going insane. And so I started reading books. In the first year I read 10 books, and last year I read 52, one a week.
Which one was your couple or three tops or five? How am I?
Look, the number one book that everybody who wants to get into business and entrepreneurship has to read is Beyond Entrepreneurship 2.0 by Jim Collins and Bill Lazare, both ex-Stanford graduate school professors. Jim Collins wrote Good to Great. That's the second book you need to read. And then you read all of Jim. If you want to be an amazing thinker and strategist, that is research. That's not just out of Jim's head. It's the research that they did with all the Stanford professors. I mean, the founders of Netflix attribute the success of Netflix to Beyond Entrepreneurship, the original book. But don't worry about buying the original. Buy 2.0 and buy the audio too. Listen and read, because in the audio, Jim Collins narrates a significant part of the new edition. So it's the things they learnt over the period of writing the first book and the second book. And he did as a tribute to the late Bill Lazare, who passed away. That book is transformational. I make all my clients read it. I'm having a look. It's not here. But The Lean Startup is an amazing book by Eric Nies, because it's simple and it's a simple methodology. There are so many books that, depending on where you're at on your journey. I mean, you could always read an introduction to a business growth mindset, which I wrote. It was very fortunate. It made, the top 100 books in print
awesome.
a couple of years ago. And to think that, I'm dyslexic and I've ADHD, and I was able to put a book together in the first place. And now I've written 3, and I've got 2 more with the publisher at the moment.
Great.
And a lot of it is just because I love the transfer of information, and it's not, you don't write a book to make money. Okay. Anyone who tells you you can get rich writing a book, that's nonsense, right? You write a book because you want to pass on information. And for me, it's why I, like telling the Toby story, because Toby didn't have to pass on that information. He's a young rich lister, and there he is having breakfast with me, and we're just getting to know each other. And that's all it is. We're acquaintances. We see each other on the street. We say hi to each other, and it's always a very positive embrace, because high functioning, high performance people don't have to live in each other's shoes. It's a respect thing. And him and Kayla are 30 years old, and it's quite remarkable what they've been able to do. And it was hard work. It was hard work and smart. But again, you got to feed your mind, right? So if you're not going to go out there and do the heavy lifting, then you got to feed the mind. And if you're doing both, well, then it's even more powerful, Geni. And I think that's what blows my mind about the children today, not children, even us adults, the opportunity we have just with the internet, being able to jump online and Google stuff. And if you want to go deeper, go to Google Scholar and pull up, academic papers from students and from, professors that have written amazing stuff, and just, feed your brain. I mean,
so much opportunity.
Absolutely. I mean, my wife and I were talking about it last night. It was the last night? Yeah, last night at dinner. I was saying, isn't it amazing that we're talking about Blockbuster, and we're talking about, in the 90s, you had to go with your parents in a car to drive to the local shopping center, to go into a video store, to borrow a cassette, right? Like VHS, to put into your VHS player, right? And you had $6.95. So think about inflation, right? Like people complain about clicking a button on their Netflix and getting it for $11.90 a month, or even when you want to buy a new release for $6.90. That same brand new release, you had to drive to a video store, maybe 6 kilometers away, so return trip of 12 kilometers, petrol consumption, pay $6.90 25 years ago, and then you had to return it the next day. And it's like you had to return it by this time, and that was like it was like a hotel check-in and check-out. and you sit there and you think, and look at that, 20 years later, we go to VHS, but now we actually have streaming. But look at in between, right? In between, we had DVDs, Blu-rays, USB sticks, right? just downloading,
Yeah,
and now we have
advancement of
streaming.
technology is amazing. And
Oh,
so
and
it's
the
great.
movement, right? So
A
we're moving at
movement.
this incredible pace, and this is why tenacity, perseverance, adaptability, and courage is even more important today. So because we are so connected, right? And instead of looking at that as a negative, how do you take it to a positive? How do you make sure? Now we've got to make sure we also protect our young and vulnerable people, because the internet is not a safe place at the
Mm-hmm.
same time. And I think that we are now starting to understand the impact of cyber attacks, and all of this stuff that's happening, and suicide is up, and people are so we need to really start to develop resilience in people, but also start to put some barriers in place where like we've got rules. Our children will not be having a phone until they're 14, 15,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not going to be on social media until they're 16, until they can actually totally appreciate the kind of crap that is actually out there. Even getting Leo off YouTube is been a challenge, because he has to use it for school. And I'm like, mate, you need to come off this channel.
I think that's important to illustrate that creating boundaries, even as an adult, as a business owner, especially being able to say no, know when to say no, because that bring you back to the focus. And when you
That's a
talk
really
about
good point, Geni. Boundaries. Yeah,
boundaries, yeah, it's like when you
absolutely.
start talking
Yeah,
about
well
you
taken.
about the kids, but then as an adult, we need to be able to set up boundaries too, because it's so important. If you don't, you can't say yes to everything and everyone, because you're just not going to be able to stick to your focus and get to your vision and get where you want it to be at the end of the day. And that brings me to another question: how is that you stand out in a crowded internet world? Do you create? I know you like to talk about blue and red ocean. I also know you like to talk about attracting your clients with lead magnets. What is the best way? You have so much wisdom and experience. In your opinion, the internet is overcrowded, just a little bit, maybe.
It is very much overcrowded. I mean, look, it's becoming harder to stand out in the market. I use a blend of traditional media
Mm.
as well as digital. I think a lot of people have gotten so wound up that the only marketing mechanism is digital, and it's fantastic because old school people like me go back and use radio, TV. We use letterbox drops. Yes, you're not reaching as many people, but you actually get a better quality of what you're reaching at the same time, and you support it with a digital strategy. I've owned digital companies since 2005, so I've been kind of through this whole phase. My first business was a website company in doing stuff for hospitality. Not my first business, but my first business in the media industry. Then we went into the SEO market. The days
So
where you could charge
combination of
5,000.
both world. You use the
Yeah.
mhm,
Well, it
traditional.
was about being able to grow in a market. And I think we're seeing a comeback to traditional media. But look, how do you stand out in a crowded market? Well, the first thing is you've got to attract the right people. Okay, so you got to know your niche,
Mhm.
and you got to know it well. And niching down to the smallest common denominator is going to give you the best return. It might not give you the vanity metrics that you want, but it's going to give you the return. And I think this is the confusion people get. I need to be Gary V and have 50 million followers. No, you don't. And Gary has worked really bloody hard to get his organic following, right?
Mm.
And everyone knows who Gary is. I've been following
Dean
Gary.
call it a dot. Dean calls it a dot. What is your dot?
Where's your dot? And you think about it, he started with Wine Library and his dad's liquor store. Like, I mean, give the man some credit. Like, don't look at what he's got now and all the cool stuff that he does. He has worked really bloody hard to get to where he has gotten to. And he took the gamble with hiring D-Rock and getting him to follow him around and do all that stuff and really elevated his content game. And that's what I'm trying to get at. So firstly, you got to attract the right audience. And how do you do that? Lead magnets, right? If you're going to write a book that people want to read, right? And then give it away, right? And then that'll attract those types of people. Create a lead magnet that people value. So, for example, how to attract your ideal client and give away a workbook on how to create your niche. The second step is give value, right? So once you attract someone, give them some value so you can become trusted and develop credibility with that person, right? Because then you got to step into what we call conversion, right? And so the models are really attract, convert, deliver, and scale, right? And it doesn't matter where you are on the spectrum of business. When you start, you have to spend a lot of time attracting. But then when you're looking at that attraction, you got to offer value, and you do that through your content. Like a lot of people say to me, you give away so much of your IP in your content, like in your videos, in your newsletter. I have a LinkedIn newsletter that goes out to, I don't know, I think 10,000, 9,000 subscribers a week, just on the LinkedIn platform, not my database of 30,000 odd people.
I sign up.
Yeah, and it's a simple newsletter. It's really 2-3 key points and some practical components. We have a hot seat that we do every week, where one of my GM asks me a series of questions affecting our clients, and I give it away. And sometimes I get annoyed because it's like, Simone, you've just asked me a question that I have to answer. If you ask me a question, I have to answer. I can't hide it, right? And she's like, yeah, I know, but our customers love it. People love it, and so. People then get on there, but you've got to have a fine balance about giving away all your IP, because then people go, oh, well, I can do it on my own. People can't do it on their own. The reality of it is
they have to have
that. Absolutely. So one of the programs that we built for business owners that has had, we built this a couple of years ago, actually a couple of years ago next week, is it's all built around accountability and strategy. Because a lot of people can't afford a strategist at $20,000 a day, right? And that's my fee for but that's my charge out rate now for a whole day, right? If I've got to go out to work with someone, normally a strategy development takes 3 days. But when you think about the clients that I'm working with, they're $5-10 million businesses. That's a drop in the ocean, because when we turn around and we can make them that money by just 1 or 2 really clever solutions that we've been able to unpack, or opportunities, because we bring fresh eyes into the equation, right? So, someone invests $60,000, their potential gross earning is millions, right? So it's relative. But when I want to help mum and dad businesses, because I want all the side hustlers in the world to develop a proper business, and I want to get all those people that are stuck at $5,000 a month and get them to $10,000 a month, then the game is completely different. Right, that's right. And so they can't afford that. So what have we done? We've built it in a group environment where over the course of a year, we build them a strategic plan, and we build them the accountability, and we build them the marketing systems, and we give them the intelligence. And and that's for those companies that are in that mids range, $500,000 right up to 2 million. Then the little people that are just starting off, we teach them a very basic attraction, conversion, and delivery method, right? And people go, oh, I had someone the other day, because I do a lot of my own chats, because I like to just find out what new people are doing and where our prospects are feeling, and that's a great way for me to stay engaged in a new market. So this is some of the hard smarts that I teach people, that people don't get to see. It's me behind the scenes. So if you're normally, like me, you and I connected through LinkedIn, that's me talking to you. Right. People say to me, oh, look at your, people go, look at your automation. Yeah, I own an outsourcing company with 80 odd staff, and I could automate this, but it's me. I'm actually sitting here talking to you, right? The initial message I send out is automated, but it's automated by a human, not by a robot. It's my VA is sitting there messaging people within my target reach saying, hey, want to have a conversation, right? And then all of a sudden you start to talk. That's me. I then get in and I talk, and that's how we started our flow of connection.
That was
because
me too.
You need to be. Yeah, you need to be a real person at that point, right? And and I could have my own team doing that. I could have my GM doing that. But I want to understand. I want to get dirty in the trench and understand what it is that people want to talk about. And
that's where the passion and purpose comes in.
Yeah, and it's a commitment. It's a commitment of 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes at night. And again, it's a commitment. It's boundaries. When people say to me, "Geez, you turn everything off for 30 minutes," I'm like, yeah. And if I'm having a great time and a great conversation, I'll keep going, right? And I'm not there trying to sell anyone anything. Now, that's my weakness. I should try and close people more, but because I don't need it, I want to have a conversation. And I've met some really incredible people just in the last 2 weeks. You being one of them. I've met really humble people who are trying to make a difference in their world.
Mm.
And why wouldn't I want to be part of that? And that's how I look at it.
Yeah,
It's really important.
that's how I look. That's how I look at it too. So, Kristian, I
Mm.
know you have meetings to attend. So, how would you sum up our conversation? Because you and I can talk for another hour or two, and it will be lots of fun.
Look, we could dive in. I mean, you're asking me all the questions about all the things that I love, right? And so,
of course, that's what I love too. That's why we connected.
Yeah, and I think it's really important. When you love what you do and you love the people around you, and you really have passion and purpose. And I think this is how you summarize this conversation, because we've gone in one very clear direction. Is you got to have goals, right? You got to have purpose. You got to have goals, and you got to know who you are, right? You got to know what you stand for. If you don't know what you stand for, then stop everything you're doing and go and reflect. And if you don't know how, drop me a line, drop me a message. I'll send you a tool to do that, right? Like, no strings attached, just say that you heard me on Geni's way, and I'll flick you something. Do you know what I mean? Like, out of respect for the time that you've spent with me. But I think you've got to live with purpose. I know that cliche, and it's my, and it's my strat line, but you've got to live with purpose. And then you've got to have passion. You've got to be able to persevere. You've got to be able to adapt so you can pivot. You got to be courageous. You got to be brave. And if you're a young entrepreneur, or even an established entrepreneur, or you're a dreamer, right? As Steve Jobs says, the dreamers who dream and do nothing get nowhere. But the dreamers who take action, regardless of whether they fail or succeed, live a more fulfilled life. And that's what I think it's all about.
Mm.
It's about living a fulfilled life. People often ask me, and I'll wrap up on this. People often ask me, Kristian, what makes you keep going?
That's a great question.
If I stop, I'm dead.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to die. I'm going to keep living, right? And that's the point. Without purpose, you essentially are dying a slow, painful death. Mm-hmm. And I think statistically, Harvard, HBR did some research on this, or Harvard did, and something like 70% of people have no purpose. The statistics in Fortune 500 companies, and this study was done, I think, in 2012. Only 20% of CEOs of Fortune 500 companies had a purpose. And I mean, it just makes you wonder why alcoholism, drug addiction, depression, even in those high profile, I've got so much money jobs, is so bad. You look at all the celebrities that have horrible lives afterwards or whenever, and you look at it and go, but why? Because they don't have any purpose. They've achieved so much. I think there's a study on astronauts, and it's something that NASA apparently have spent a fair bit of money on. You imagine you spend your whole life studying, being a genius, proper genius, and then you go into space, a place that only very few people have been to, and then you come back to Earth. Apparently, most of these astronauts suffer from terrible anxiety and depression post that, because what else can you do, right? But the reality of it is there's so much more they can do. There's so much they could give back. There's other things that they could do. But because their whole focus for all their life was that one thing, and then they did it, right? Whereas me, my hardest challenge, Geni, is actually being happy and satisfied with what I did yesterday, because I'm constantly going. Like, my wife says to me, she goes, when are you going to slow down? And I'm like, Lucy, if I slow down, I'm going to die.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you've got to keep going, and you got to, like I've been teaching my children so they don't become like me, celebrate when you actually achieve something.
Yes.
Right? Because I celebrate
small steps. Yes.
Yeah, I celebrate, but I then kind of move on too quickly. I don't really enjoy the moment. And, I sell a company and I'll go and buy myself something, and that's my celebration. Like, I'll normally have a goal associated to something. I have a very good watch collection for that reason. And so, I'll sell a company, I'll buy myself a Rolex, right? Like, just it's a thing. But now it's kind of like, I don't want to do that. Like, so I sold a company 4 years ago, and we set it on something 3 years ago, and I used the proceeds of that to go to the schools, to the kids' tuition, right? And so it's a done deal, right? So that was my thing. It was like, I'm now going to put this money away, and that goes to the kids' tuition for the next 10 years at a private school. And it's those little things that you start to change, and you don't make it so superficial. You make it more, to me, it's, Lucy and I support an underprivileged child with a group of us to go to one of the best schools with an athletics background, right? So if they've got an athletics background and they can't afford to that school, there's 10 of us, and we fund a full scholarship for that child to go to that school. That's the kind of shit that I like doing now. I like looking at going, that's going to change someone's life. And if that person changes their life, it's going to affect their parents. It's going to affect everyone else thereafter. One of the young boys is now an Australian running champion, and he's affecting a whole bunch of other people generationally, right? Because he's now got great gratitude in his heart that a group of, middle-aged and now older men and women have been supporting this young man through his journey. Now, my wife and I are looking at starting the same thing at my daughter's school, but with an arts element to it, because my wife is a painter and the head of our graphic design department in our media company. And so, we want to do this to be able to touch more people's lives. And,
Purpose
and I think
and
this
mission, and continuously involve in creating that next goal, next purpose. They give the meaning, a total meaning to your life. That excites you every time you wake up.
Look, it's meaning, Geni, absolutely. But I just think that, after having great success and having great failure and having nothing, I realized about the power of giving, right? And truly being a philanthropist, not someone who boasts about it. And, I've used that into context of what we're talking about. But there's a lot of things that we do that people don't know that we do. And I love doing those things for people. And, we have a corporate social responsibility program in our company where we'll work with 2 people who can't afford our services if they pass our means test, and we'll support them through. Out of all those people that I've put through in the last 4 years, only 2 have never gone on to become full paying clients, which means they've made lots of money, right? And so, and therefore we can affect not just their life, but their family's life. To me, family's so important. Being able to hold it all together. And it's hard. It's hard to be a parent. It's hard to be a husband. It's hard to be a wife. All of those things are hard.
But nothing is easy. You just have to put your mindset and determination. Just work toward whatever you choose, and you picture your life, and there you are. Yeah.
That's right.
I really want to appreciate Kristian coming to Geni's Way with all of your wisdom and experience. And we hope that if we change one person's life and empower one person, that we made it worth it.
Absolutely. I mean, my purpose is to change the world one person at a time, starting with me. And that's hopefully what we've been able to achieve today. Like even I've learned stuff for being on here, reflecting on what I've been talking about and what I've been sharing about. And I look at it and I think, thank you for the opportunity. I really valued being here today, and I really, really appreciate you reaching out and us having a conversation and building a dialogue. And I look forward to staying really well connected with you and seeing what else we can do. Maybe there's a part 2 that'll come out at some stage with a series of other questions. But Geni, thank you so much. I do have to go now because I've got to jump into a leadership training day.
Thank you for being here, and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
No worries. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
My biggest takeaways from this conversation are that providing value is a top effective strategy for standing out in a crowded internet world, and that we can't lose sight of that fact. Also, I see that the power to pivot and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances is crucial for business success, because when you combine passion, purpose, and the right strategy, you can achieve anything. Kristian is awesome for reminding us of this. Thanks for being with me today. Really, I so much enjoy helping people to succeed. Please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps so much. Until next time, see you.